Alright, we're going to be talking about understanding malware in this presentation. So a little bit of an introduction. Who am I? I am William Hofer. I am a senior at Dakota State University in Madison, South Dakota. I'm studying computer and network security for my bachelor's degree, and will be moving into a master's in information assurance in the fall of 2015. So why talk about malware? I think it's important because malware affects everybody, but more important is the impact it can have on an enterprise environment. And what's in this presentation? Well, I'll be explaining what malware is and the types of malware there is. I will identify who is a target of malware and for what particular reasons. I'll be explaining some basic prevention methods when dealing with malware on the internet. I'll also be talking about what can be done once a piece of malware has found its way into a network. And then finally, I'll be talking about some techniques for analyzing malware and the caveats that come along with dealing with malware analysis. So what is malware? Malware, the word, is a concatenation of the words malicious and software. It is software that wants to do some harmful thing to a computer system. Malware comes in a few different forms. I got some silly pictures there that kind of depict that. It can be spyware, like the guy with the newspaper there. So it's software that spies on your habits, like your internet history, your shopping cart activity. And you can have something like a bot, which is something that a bad guy can use to activate your computer in a more orchestrated attack. So this malware gets distributed, and then the attacker has access to your machine to use at a later time. A backdoor, which in other words, is a way for a bad guy to get into the system and possibly even into the network. Then there's something called ransomware, such as CryptoLocker, which is something that encrypts your data and makes you pay to decrypt it. And then the final one I have here as an example would be a Trojan horse, which is a program that is disguised as a harmless one but does malicious activity, just like the mythology Trojan horse. So who is a target? Honestly, about everyone is a target. Malware authors put their software on the internet and wait for victims to download and run their executables. Back to a point I made earlier, this can be devastating when it comes to an enterprise environment. If a piece of malware enters a corporate network, there is potentially staggering losses. Targets of malware can be intended for different purposes depending on the types of malware. A piece of ransomware is generally used to make money or attempt to, at least. A bot is used in an attack later, such as a denial of service attack, and a backdoor can be used at any time for any reason as long as it goes undetected. So that's probably why you should worry about malware. How can we stop malware? Well, some simple solutions to stopping malware include antivirus and intrusion detection systems. These methods, coupled with subscribing to known bad IP lists, can prevent most existing malware from ever affecting a system. The problem with an antivirus or an IDS is it only catches the signatures of malware it knows. If a piece of malware is brand new or can manipulate itself, as some advanced malware has been known to do recently, to be something different, each time, then these security measures are completely useless. A more heuristic model for detecting malware is needed, and this is a kind of a cat and mouse game that the malware authors are playing with the good guys who are trying to stop malware. A second and very useful tip to preventing malware is the education of users. More often than not, malware has entered a system came from clicking something you probably shouldn't have on the internet. So you can educate your users to be more wary of clicking on email links and downloading executables from websites that are not in your circle of trust. Some enterprise networks even have gone as far as to block the transfer of download or installation of any executable files. And this works to an extent. Extension behind a file can be changed, and executables can also be hidden in things such as PDFs or even Word documents. So what can be done after an infection has already happened? Because more than likely at some point, malware is going to get on the system. At the simplest level, a scan can be run by your antivirus, and it may detect and remove malicious software. You may see something on a home computer like a malicious or a bad executable has been detected on this system, and Windows Defender has removed it. Like I mentioned before, it's not always going to catch that malware because malware can manipulate itself, or it could be a piece of brand new malware that nobody knows about. So, second thing, another trivial method is you can manually check for things like toolbars and browser add-ons that you never installed and that are sitting there and they might be spyware. You can check your processes that are running on your system if your computer starts to run slowly and you suspect malware's on your system. You can try to detect an unusual presence. So, when a piece of malware has infected a system, sometimes the best solution is just to do a system restore back to an earlier date, or even go as far as a total re-image of the operating system in the worst case scenario, when you cannot figure out how to get rid of the malware. So the last piece I'd like to talk about is analyzing malware. And this is something that's very interesting to me, and if you're in the computer field, then it could be also interesting to you. There are two main types of analysis: static and dynamic analysis. Static analysis refers to the examination of a malicious piece of software when it is not running. Static analysis usually involves looking for strings in a piece of malware or checking to see what libraries are being used by the piece of malware. Dynamic analysis involves looking at the malware while it is running or after it is run. Dynamic analysis is usually done in a very controlled environment, such as a virtual machine or something that is completely cut off from the internet, so it cannot spread or do any real harm. If you're familiar with the registry in Windows, a lot of malware actually manipulates this so that it runs on your startup, and during dynamic analysis, after it's run or during the run of a piece of malware, you may take a look and see if the malware is manipulating the registry keys. Malware may try to connect out to an external source to download either another piece of malware or another piece of information it needs. And, excuse me, with a packet capture while the malware is running, you can sort of detect this and see where it's trying to go out and connect to. So, something called reverse engineering, or RE as I've put on the slide, can be done on malware. This involves actually disassembling or taking the code or taking the executable or program and putting it back into a code form that you can read or that is somewhat readable. And you try to go through the code and figure out what the malware is doing. It's probably the most in-depth form of static analysis. And the problem with reverse engineering and malware authors is that malware authors are becoming trickier, and as malware and analysts become more aware, malware authors are becoming more trickier. They're using techniques to hide their code so that reverse engineering cannot be performed on the code, which this technique is sometimes called obfuscation, or you hide the data or hide the true intent of the code. Whoops. So, in summary, malware is present all over across the internet and can be devastating to a system and even more devastating to an enterprise environment that holds a lot of assets. Malware comes in a lot of different flavors, and each flavor may have a different goal. Using an antivirus at home and an intrusion detection system in an enterprise environment is a really good idea, but to make sure that any suspicious activity is detected, you should probably monitor your network and respond to incidents in a network when something is happening. Detecting and mitigating malware is an ongoing battle and is very important, and it will be as long as there are malware authors out there. There's much more to malware and malware analysis out there that I could not fit into this presentation of this form. And the last thing I'd like to do is thank you for listening.